Hands down, I think these are some of my favorite videos to make. And the reason for that is because I get to answer your questions. I've got all these ideas in my, in my head that I think are gonna be popular or that you guys are gonna like to watch, but there's nothing like answering your direct questions. So a couple weeks ago now, I think it's probably 3 weeks ago, I asked this question on YouTube and I said, give me your questions. Anything and everything about real estate, about my personal life. I love answering questions. So that's what we're talking about in this video today. I've got 5 questions that I'm gonna answer and let's get into it. First and foremost, if you have no idea who this weird looking guy is on camera, my name is Bryce. I make videos here on YouTube talking about personal finance and especially real estate. You can also follow me on Instagram down below at Bryce Matheson. It's a little bit less formal on Instagram. I throw some memes up there. I'll walk through some of my properties and current projects that I'm working on. So definitely follow me there as well. So getting into it, the very first question is by Ken Colt, and he asks, what's the best way to build a contact list of trusted repairmen, plumbers, landscapers when you self-manage your properties? I've done a little bit of everything. So I've gone on Google and just looked at reviews, but probably the best way is just talking to other investors. So even just two nights ago, I think, I had a rental property that there was all sorts of like plumbing issues, and the tenant would flush the toilet and literally like sewage water was seeping out underneath the toilet all over the floor. And you know what? I could have gone out there myself. I could have looked at it. I probably could have fixed it, but ain't nobody got time for that. So I called up a plumber that I got a recommendation from one of my contractors, and he was awesome. He did such a good job. He was super cheap. I'm definitely going to use him again. I think people get trapped in the idea that they have to have one electrician and one plumber, and that's all they use. I've had electricians that I've used before, and they were okay. And then I found an electrician that I absolutely love. Prices are good, they're responsive, and I give them a call and they go out and they take care of it. So don't feel like you have to find the right one right off the bat. Check Google. If you find somebody that you like, great. If not, ask other real estate investors in your area, ask other contractors, just get, referrals and recommendations. And that's probably how you're going to find, the best tradesman. What would you do if you were leaving town for a week or two? Is there any precautions you can take to ensure your tenants are looked after? I don't really worry about it, mainly because I've got a team of people that I can call if something happens. It's not like I pay them full time or anything, but I do have an electrician, I've got a plumber, I've got all these different people that I can call if something happens. Most of the time though, I don't get called for repairs. And I honestly feel like if you're worried about leaving for just a week or two, then you're probably doing something wrong in your business and you're too involved in the business. There's a phrase that says you need to work on your business and not in your business. If you're having to, do stuff like that every single week or two and you can't even take a vacation, you're doing something wrong. I know this is more than one question, but I appreciate any advice you can give. Looking to buy my first property very soon. Ken, way to go. Jump on it because you'll love it and you're not going to turn back. Pretty Boy Chris asks, I live in San Francisco. The Bay Area is very expensive, which it is. Is it a good investment to invest here? But first, I have a hard time to get a down payment when houses here are about 1.2 million. Rent is average 2,500. What do you think? That's okay. So here's kind of my pet peeve. So a lot of people, like, those who live in San Francisco or New York, LA, all this kind of stuff, they say, I can't invest here. It's too expensive. I completely disagree with that. So first and foremost, if you live in a high cost of living area, that means that there's just as much opportunity to make even more money than where I live. I live in a low to medium cost of living area. And when I do a house flip, for example, I try and shoot for, $25,000 profit. But if I was in San Francisco or LA or some of these other expensive areas, you should shoot for $100,000 or $150,000. Just because your market is more expensive and the number is physically higher, it doesn't matter. There's still opportunity to make money. If you feel like you have to have money to get started in real estate, you're wrong. Does it make it easier? Yeah, 100% it does. But the number one thing that I would recommend is find a deal. Go out and make sure you have a deal, because if you have a deal, you will find the money. A true investor that sees opportunity is not going to walk away from a deal that's going to make him hundreds of thousands of dollars. So what I would recommend is, rather than trying to save up a down payment to buy a property that's $1.2 million, find a deal and then link it up with an investor who has money, and then you'll get a cut of that commission. That's absolutely how you should get started if you don't have money. Don't try and save your way to wealth, because you can't get there. Now, of course, if you don't want to go down this route, sure, you could invest in the Midwest, or you can buy a REIT, or there's lots of different things that you can do. But don't feel like just because you live in a high cost of living area that you can't invest in real estate. John Sad asks, well, sorry, John. Sorry you're so sad. Hello, and thanks for your helpful videos. I've got $150,000 cash. Would you recommend buying one house cash or taking a mortgage and buying 2 to 3? I've got no experience in real estate, but want to get my feet wet. Also, I've been looking into Roofstock. What do you think about it? 100%, if you've got $150,000, buy multiple properties. Don't put it all in cash. The reason for that is because leverage is a tool. Leverage is what you use to make more money. So think about this. If you have $150,000 cash that you put on one property, there's no risk. That's great. I guess I wouldn't say there's no risk, but there's less risk. But you've got all of this equity tied up in one property. So let's say that property over the course of a year goes up in value from $150,000 now to $160,000 or $170,000. In turn, if you take that $150,000 and you use it as down payments on 4 or potentially even 5 properties, depending on where you live, let's say you now have 4 properties. Now all 4 of those properties can go up in value $10,000 or $20,000. So rather than going from $150,000 to $170,000, you've now got 4 properties that go up $20,000 in value. So for the same amount of money, you could make $20,000 or you could make $80,000. I'm sure I can guess which one you would want to take. So 100% definitely use leverage, because that's how you make money. Debt is a tool and it's not something to be afraid of. Also, I've been looking into Roofstock. What do you think about it? So for those who are not familiar with Roofstock or what that is, essentially it's a turnkey rental property. So these are people who buy distressed properties, they fix them up, they rehab them, and then they put property management in place, and then they sell them to investors all across the country. So if you're an investor and you've got some money, you can buy a property in Tennessee or Kansas or Oklahoma, or usually that's where they're at, is in the Midwest. You buy this property, you put up all the money, but then they've got a nice property for you to purchase, and you've got property management in place. You don't really have to do anything, and you just get a return on it. I personally am not a fan of Roofstock. I've never actually used it, but the reason that I say that is because there's more opportunity, if you know what you're doing, to do a house flip in your own backyard. So rather than getting, maybe 8 to 10% on a property, which you could just get in the stock market, or you could take that same amount of money, do a house flip or buy a rental in your own area, and you'll make a lot more money. Now, of course, if you're just starting out, there's some risk there. You don't know what you're doing, but that's all part of the process. With real estate, you kind of got to jump in both feet first and just take it as it is. So Roofstock, meh, it's fine, but I'm not super impressed with it. I think you could make more money doing it yourself. Justin Ramirez asks, any plan for commercial in the future? Yeah, absolutely. The only downside with commercial is that instead of 20 or 25% down for a residential loan, now you have to do 30%. So it's a little bit more difficult to buy commercial properties just because it requires more capital. The nice thing though is that, well, maybe not a nice thing, I don't know. Things are a little bit different with commercial. So for example, usually they'll amortize the loan over 25 years, but it has a balloon payment at 5 or 7 years. So there's just a little bit more that you have to think about. But rather than like these huge, massive, like 50 unit apartment complexes, I'd love to get there someday. But I think as far as commercial, I'd like to get like an office space or something like that. And I just kind of want to dabble in it first before I jump all the way into it. But right now, residential loans are super easy to get. Interest rates are super low. And when you can lock them in for 30 years at a fixed interest rate, it's kind of hard to say no to that. So no, I'm definitely not turned off to it. I actually have in the works a 9-unit storage, like a mini storage that I'm working on right now. And I guess that would be considered my first commercial deal. but it's not like, you know, either way, I guess I've got plans for residential and commercial. If the right deal comes up, I'm not going to say no, but I'm also not done with residential loans either. Vegan in 2016 asks, what is your dream number? Number of apartments or monthly income? Also, what's the biggest mistake that set you back from reaching your real estate goals thus far? Dream number, I don't really have like a dream number as far as apartments go. You know, I could have 1,000 apartments or I could have 10 apartments. I don't really care as long as we hit the dollar amount that we want. And that dollar amount that we want is $10,000 net per month. So as long as we hit 10 grand a month, like I said, I don't care if I have 10 properties or, you know, 50 properties. At the kind of our current rate, it seems like we'll need to have about 30 to 35 doors before we can hit that mark. And so, you know, really truly, that's kind of our goal right there, I guess you could say. So about 30-ish doors, but as long as we hit that $10,000 mark, I don't really care too much. Now, having said that though, a lot of people have like a door amount in their head. And the reason that I don't is because rather than managing 100 units, I could also manage 20 units. As long as I'm making the same amount of money, absolutely, I would rather manage 20 units than 100 units. It's just way less work. So I think our goal is to get up to that $10,000 mark, and then slowly we would actually start paying off properties and selling other properties to pay off the properties that we do want to hang on to. And so I think ultimately the goal was only to have 20-ish doors, have them all paid off, and then we can cash flow like crazy. That way it's just not as big of a deal from a management perspective. Biggest mistake that set you back from reaching your real estate goals thus far? Probably the biggest thing would be mindset. You know, it's really scary. It's really scary to jump in and kind of try new things because there's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of risk involved. And I would say that mindset, at least initially, was the first thing that really just was like, I don't know if I can do this. I'm not sure that I'm smart enough or that I know enough to be able to do this. And once you jump in and you just do it, it's really not as difficult as people make it out to be. So I think getting started sooner would probably be my biggest regret, and then just not having the mindset to take risks and try it. So I would definitely work on your mindset. A lot of people have the word can't in their vocabulary, and I have tried very, very hard to remove that word from my vocabulary. Okay, so those are the 5 questions. Again, I love these videos. They are so fun for me. I love answering your guys' questions. So if you have a question that you want answered, be sure to comment in, one of my videos, and I'll try and grab it there. But periodically, I'll try and do more of these question and answer style videos just because I really do enjoy them so much. So next time I post asking for questions, be sure not to miss that, and I will catch your question in the next one. Anyway, till next week, guys, thanks so much for watching. See you then.